Hello, screenwriters, and welcome to Writing for Screens. Today's episode, I have thoughts. Locked in, an update on the Writing for Screens book process. My name is Glenn Gers, and I am the Chief Operating Everything at Writing for Screens, a channel that I have developed out of a 25-year career writing for TV and movies. Now I'm on my way out of the business, and I am trying to leave behind a bunch of skills and tools and insights that I had to figure out for myself. I'm hoping that they will be useful to you. They are not presented in any system, even in any order. They are simply a bunch of things for you to try as you figure out for yourself what works for you. Because there is no right or wrong way to be creative. There is no right or wrong way to be a writer. So what I have tried to do is create this channel. Here's a little capture of the main page of the channel. And if you look down towards the bottom, you will see that there are playlists. The playlists, here's a closer view of them. The first three playlists are Screenwriting Essentials, Screenwriting Tools, Skills, and Craft, and the process, being a writer. The point of these three playlists, which contain about 50 10-minute videos, is they are a collection of things for you to try. It's everything I know boiled down into little 10-minute videos, what I call lessons. Each one has a topic. The topic is not just the title, but the bright, colorful thumbnail that you can read and say, that's what it's about. It's about character or flashbacks or genre or whatever it is that I've got to talk about. I have boiled those things down to a bunch of things to think about, things to try, ideas, ways to look at things, all of which you need to figure out if they work for you, because not all of them will. Some will, some won't. There is no one way to do this. There is no right way to do it. So all I can do is say, hey, here's what I think about flashbacks. Maybe this is helpful. This is how it worked for me. And then you can try that and see if it works for you. Having completed these 50 videos, and this, I urge you to look at these, please. Anything that you want to know from me, it's already here 24/7 for free. Please look at them. Okay, when you're done with that, you'll find that I am here live streaming once a week. Every Wednesday, if I can make it, at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time Zone, in which I talk about a different topic every week. This week's topic, I'm going to do a little report on where I am with turning these 50 videos into a book. Some people have said that they find working with a book is easier than trying to understand from videos. I get that. I don't disagree. So I've been trying to work on learning how to do that. And I hit an interesting point, which I want to talk about, which I am calling the tipping point, the moment that you get locked in, as the young folks say. And so what I'm going to do is talk about that a little, and then I will be open to questions. Okay, let's say some hellos. Hi, Tom. Hello, Doreen. Hello, Michael. Okie dokie. So let's see what's going on. So here's the topic, which I am calling Locked In. But what it's really about is in anything that I've worked on, there comes a moment, and you don't know when it's going to happen, and I don't know what makes it happen, but at a certain point, you begin to see that it is a thing that exists that you can finish. I don't know how better to explain it. For a long time, there's like, I don't quite have it. I don't quite have it. And all of a sudden, literally one morning, you look at it and you go, it's now I see. There's this many sequences, there's this many scenes, there's this many chapters, and each one of them has a thing to do, and I know how to do that thing. I know the voice of this project, the style of this project. Something about it begins to make sense, and you simply say, now I understand. And all of a sudden the work moves much more quickly. You kind of disengage from it, weirdly. You are no longer consumed by it. You're like, oh yeah, no, this is a task. This is like if you're building a house, you're like, okay, I know the steps. I have to pour the foundation. I have to put up the walls. I have to frame each wall. That's like steps that you can take, and they don't they don't seem vague or weird or hard. They're just like, yeah, if I keep doing this thing, this will be done. And that is this very, very, I don't even know how to explain it. I don't know what to call it. But a couple of weeks ago, it clicked in for me. I had been working for a while. What I had been doing is here. Let me show you a little bit. Okay, so here is the file with the text. Okay, so what I got here is over on this side, to the left side, you can see there's what they call in Scrivener's the binder, which is all the folders with all the chapters. I'm trying to break it up into many, many very small chapters. If a section can be a half a page or a page, that's great. And so what I've done is I've divided into some big sections, and then in each section there's little mini lectures, just like the videos. And what I did was I color coded them. So as you can see, when I did the very, very rough draft, they're in blue. And then as I rewrote them, I put them into yellow. The first draft was essentially taking the scripts for the videos, which were broken into just these little tiny note cards that I could read from while I was performing. But in order to make them into a book, I had to turn them into sentence form because they were in like teleprompter form. So this is the stuff that I had in sort of just turning it into sentences. Then I began to work on getting the sentences into paragraphs. As the paragraphs get broken up and sharpened, I change the color to orange. And then up here, this is when it's a pretty good draft. So that's what I've been doing, is just the first thing I did was I collected every single script from the 50 videos, which were, as I said, let me see if I can find a copy of one of those scripts. Let me see here. Let's see a script video. Yeah, okay. So here's the script for the video on Revelation. Let me show you that. Okay, so the script is so let's bring this down in size a little. Let's make it 200. Okay. So like I said, each one of these things is in these little tiny, here, boom. Okay. So what I've got is a scroll, and every one of these is just what I think of as a teleprompter card. In other words, this is the amount I could remember. This is the amount that if I had to do a video, I could remember this much with the dotted lines. That's how much I could hold in my head and speak calmly before I had to stop and look at the page. So what I did was I broke it down into these very, very readable, recitable versions. So what I took was, I took each one of those and I copied and pasted all of that text into new documents for the book. And then I went through and I said, okay, so now I've got these little like chunks of words, which are good for a teleprompter. But I want to make them into a book that has to be sentences. So I had to just go through, and it took several weeks to just go every one of the 50 videos and turn these cards into sentences. And then I had this hunk of random sentences, essentially, roughly in the order of the presentation that I did. But the thing is, the way that you do a video, you're sort of doing a narrative journey. But in a book, I didn't want to have to make you go through that journey. I hate that. When I'm trying to read a how-to book, I want it to be as purely recipe or how-to steps as possible. So the next thing I did was simply cut out all the little transitional sentences and comedy bits that I put in to make the videos entertaining, and just tried to get the stuff there down into the simplest version. So for instance here, and so this is, so then it becomes paragraphs. Frankly, this is a lot of paragraphs. Ideally, the paragraphs will be broken up into these little subsections with a heading. And then I have these, as you know, if you watch my videos, I have these little title cards where what I think is important, the sort of slogans, the catchy little, hopefully, like things that you can just remember, that thing I made into these title cards. I wanted to maintain that. So I've tried to figure out some way to put the title cards into this text. So that's what I've got here as the text of the book. Once I did that, I had to read through it and start to edit it and smooth it and sharpen it, because the things that you say verbally or the things that are presented in a video are not necessarily the best for a read. So that's what I've been doing, just going through. Once I got all the material in, then I went through every single step and just made it into sentences. Then I started to organize it, because sometimes the order that I would put things in a video isn't really the best order for a book. So I had to think, because sometimes I'll sort of veer off into a little tangent and then come back, or I'll be building to something. But in the book, I want that something to be actually up front. So that's what I've been doing. With each time I went through, I began to see it a little more clearly, because for a while there, I was clinging to the video versions, clinging to the spoken versions. And then recently, I began to see the book version. It began to feel like there was this separate voice of the book, which is simpler than the voice of the videos, I hope, because videos have to be entertaining in a different way than a book. So, about a week or two ago, I started to do this, and I found that, and this is the only way I know to explain this locked in click into the voice of this particular work, is that I began to organize, and I just began to feel confident. I began to feel, oh, I know this style. And for every single thing I've ever written, this moment happens when I'm sort of working on a script for a horror movie. And I've even done horror movies before, but each one has its own vibe, its own voice. And all of a sudden, somehow or other, you'll write one section or something that will click in your head, and the next time you go in, you feel different. And I do not know a better way to explain it than that you are, as I have heard my Gen Z sources say, locked in. I'm locked in. That's how it feels. I don't feel stress or worry. I'm just like, no, I've got this. I can see how to do it. I still see I have tons of stuff that I have to clean up, but I'm beginning to get a confidence about how much I want to throw away, and how much, when I spiral around, by which I mean the good kind of spiral, my sense of spiraling is that coming back to something later. Every time I come back to it, I mainly see cuts. I almost never see something that I want to add. I almost always just see cuts and cuts and cuts to make it cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. So what I wanted to talk about is, until you've done this a bunch of times, and by this I mean any creative thing where this happens. I don't know what it's like non-narratively. Like, I don't know what it would be like if you're doing a sculpture or something, but I think it still happens. But certainly for any form of narrative or writing, I know it happens, or at least it's always happened to me, is that at some point it clicks, and you know that you can get it done. And I literally never know when it's going to happen, and I honestly don't know what makes it happen. But I do know that it's like a before and after. And once you've got it, the big problem, the big question becomes what I call the crossing the street problem. I grew up in New York City. In New York City, there's a lot of cars on the street. And so very often you have to run to get across the street. This is also true in Los Angeles. When I have to run across the street because the light is changing, and there's usually like a flashing countdown, I will run across the street, and when I am about 3/4 of the way there, I'll slow down. I'll be like, I know I'm going to get to the other side now. I don't have to keep running, which is crazy because the cars could still come. But something happens where I slow down way before I'm done. And that's the thing I'm a little worried about, is the last step slowdown, running across the street possibility. because my big goal here is if I can, and I think I can, because I'm going to self-publish this, and that does not take that long, I hope to get this book physically printed by the end of August, to be somewhere in September, somewhere in that zone. I hope to have this book out there to you. And that is, so the question now is, now that I have this confidence, sometimes I can be like, okay, I don't have to worry about it, which is bad. Luckily, the other thing that happens when you have this locked in is you want to do it. And every time you sit down to do it, even if you've got other things on your mind, when you sit down, you go right back in, you lock in. So that is where I am. I'm going to talk a little bit more. Let me see. There's a lot of comments and questions here, so I'm going to quickly skim them. Going to say just do hellos for now. Then I'm going to talk a little bit more about this book process, and then I will be open to questions. Okay, so hello Hasko and Imogen and Mart. I've never met you before, Mart. Hi, Mart. The bearded screenwriter is here. Thank you. And Jens, good to see you. Feng, how are you? Sleepy. Well, okay. If you fall asleep, it's okay. Go to sleep, and then you can wake up and watch the whole thing later. It's not a problem. The release vid for my novel. No, I am not doing any, except for these conversations about the process. I have decided I'm not going to do any publicity until the book is available, because there is no point for me, and this is the thing I'm going to talk about a little later. I was thinking, like, do I want to build excitement? And the answer is no. I mean, these live streams hopefully will to a certain extent, but I was just talking to someone about the fact that I just heard that there is an Anthony Bourdain biopic coming out, which is directed by a guy named Matt Johnson, who's done some really great work. He did a great movie called Blackberry. Anyway, he's a Canadian sort of indie filmmaker, and he is doing an Anthony Bourdain biopic starring Dominic Sessa, who was the young man discovered in the movie The Holdovers. Anyway, the point is, I just heard about this today. Someone said, hey, did you hear about this thing? You would be interested. And I am interested, but now I'm frustrated because they have, as far as I know, they're just at very best starting to shoot or planning to shoot. It's not going to be available for 1 to 2 years. This breaks my heart. I don't want to know, in some ways, about something that I'm not going to see for 2 years. It's too painful. I would rather know, like, if something comes out, I can click on it right then and get it. So that's what I'm going to do with the book. When it's ready to go, I will put out social media and try and promote it. Okay. 3 things that make me happy in life: money, movies, and my live stream. Thank you. That is pretty cool. Hello, A-Link. When will you come to Germany? You know, I would love to. I unfortunately have family obligations, which mean I can't travel. I was just talking to my wife about this. Really want to. I would love to go to Germany. Anyway, thank you. If I do come to Europe, I will be in touch. Okay. I've been taking notes when I watch your videos. Do you think I should just wait for your book or continue taking it? I could do both. That's a you problem. I'm not sure. I would personally say wait for the book. It's not, like I said, it's not going to be that long. It is going to happen now. I am committing. This is hard for me because I hate to commit until I'm absolutely positive that essentially it's there. You know, what if something comes up and I'm busy and I have to, take a month or 2 off? But I am trying to commit to getting this done by September. And I think I can do it. So the answer is up to you. I would wait for the book. I think the book's going to be very helpful, but we'll see. I don't understand why people are using Save the Cat to analyze ANORA when Sean Baker already said he took inspiration from it. I agree with you about that. Let's talk about stuff like that in a minute. Okay. Taking notes helps you remember. That is true. You have to. Okay. Hi, Moria. Nice to see you. Glad to see you here. Okay. So I'm going to finish talking about this stuff about the book, because I just want to talk a little bit more about, first of all, how I got to where I got. In other words, how I got to this moment of what I always think of as click, or locking in, or whatever it is that I can't find a word for. the thing that I've been doing, that I've been focusing on, is just decluttering. I always try and throw in everything I work on. And actually, what's interesting is because it's been a while, I've been doing these videos and this teaching for 5 years. And when I started this teaching stuff, I decided for the first time since I was about 11 years old to not have a bunch of projects going at once, to not have something I was writing for myself at the same time I was doing some job. And I said, let me try and focus on the teaching. And also I wanted to know what my brain would be like if I wasn't thinking that I was writing something every day. Even though I was writing these videos, it's different. And now I'm done. I'm ready. I found what it was like, and now I'm sort of aching to go back to being a creative writer, to becoming a narrator, a fiction writer, a storyteller. So what I discovered is when I had all this material, which I have for everything, like when I'm doing my novel, the art history novel that I'm taking a break for until this is done, I just glom on every possible thing I can think of to put in there, and I want to get it all in. And then this turning point happens when I stop thinking that's possible. When I start thinking you can't do everything, you can't get everything, you need to actually just make it what it is, and that's limited. So once I realized I'm going to simply take the scripts from these videos and turn them into a book, and then I looked at all the scripts for the videos I didn't make and all the notes for the book that I didn't use for scripts, and I put them all into one document, and then I started mercilessly cutting. All the things like, oh, this could make a good thing one day. It's either now or never, use it or lose it. So I've been really just sort of decluttering, focusing, building with the real pieces. And sometimes it felt like, am I wasting my time just going through this stuff again and again and trying to simplify it? But no, that's what's working. That's where the click happened. That's when I locked in. So the big question will become, once it's out, how do I publicize it? How do I get it out as much as possible? And I'll talk about that after I talk to your comments. Let's do some comments. Okay. So my fan club, Glenn's fan club, says, I just don't understand why people are using Save the Cat to analyze ANORA when Sean Baker already said he took inspiration from French and Russian cinema. Yes, this is part of my big complaint with any system, any formula for writing. I have put it into this video called Screenwriting Rules. I talk a lot about why I don't think a formula ever can cover everything. And what happens is if you're a Save the Cat person or a Screenwriter's Journey person or a Robert McKee person, you take this formula and you try to apply it to everything. And that's when it's a disaster, because while that formula might work, that might be a working possibility, it is not a universal formula. There is no such thing as a universal formula for art. Although artists throughout history have always tried to figure out the universal theory for art, they never can. They can come up with the kind of formula for their art or for the art they like, but that's not going to be everything. And one of the things that happens is, and this is why I honestly can't tolerate some of these how-to screenwrite books, is they will spend a good portion of their time trying to apply their formula to existing works. And first of all, almost none of those existing works were created with that formula in mind. So there's this, frankly, embarrassing to me, ugly attempt to bend the existing work to make sense in the formula. I can't read that. I can't watch that. It's painful. It's like listening to someone talk about a bad relationship, and you know that they're in a bad relationship and they're working so hard to justify it, and you just keep thinking, oh no, don't do this. That's how I feel when somebody takes Save the Cat and applies it to the Odyssey. It's just like, not going to work. Please don't do that. You're embarrassing yourself. Anyway, so my answer is people want formula. They want rules. They are making a horrible mistake when it comes to art. You cannot apply a formula to art. I mean, you can choose to be an abstract expressionist and apply certain rules. You can choose to be a social realist and follow those principles. But it's you can't say these are universal rules. So what happens is people are frantically applying formula to existing great works. It's just sad. Okay. So, should we hand copy things, theories, scene descriptions, dialogue that we find interesting? I don't know. I think it's a useful thing to do. I often have copied out quotes, especially. I have a big, it's like 100, 200 pages now of just whenever I see a cool quote, mainly about the arts, I will just type it out and put it in this document. So I have this like book of quotes. Yeah, I think it helps. I think it helps to get things in your mind when they pass through your pen and your paper or your typing. Yes, that's my opinion, is that it can't hurt unless you are not writing because you're doing that. If you are not writing, writing comes first. All these other things come second. Okay. Roberta says, do you think there is a different mentality if my target is writer-director, not solely screenwriter? I don't know about target. I mean, in some ways, yes. First of all, yes, if you are planning to direct your own work and you are writing towards that, obviously, first of all, you're writing things that you are already thinking of how you will direct, and that's cool. And frankly, in that case, my personal rule, which is don't tell the director what to do, is different because you're the director and you're basically just saying what you're planning to do. So yes, I would say that it is different. You can, if you know you're going to direct, and if you're, the thing about saying I'm going to direct my script is that when you do that and you present it to people to come on board to finance it or work on it, many people will say, we don't want you to direct. You're not an experienced director, so therefore we may love your script, but if you're attached to direct, we're not interested. So you have to decide for yourself, am I going to hold the line and refuse to let someone else direct it, even if that means it will never get made? I personally have a pile of scripts that I said, I must direct this. And I had meetings for years, sometimes decades, where people were like, we love this script. We don't think we can get it made with you as the director. And they never got made. So is that a great idea? I don't know. But I do know that there is a difference in how you write, because you can write the way you would imagine it. As long as you're not over describing, I would say that's good. And also if you're not over describing how the actors work, because that's not fair to the actors to pre-direct them on the page. But otherwise, yes, if you are writing for yourself as a director, you can be much more specific about directorial elements in the script. There you go. Greetings, Lake Filter. Hello, Stay Foolish. This morning, David Mamet, in his seminar, said that everything in the movie must be strictly controlled, including every movement, details, and breathing. Is that true that all that is in the script? No. In fact, Mamet does not even put it in his scripts. His scripts are stripped down very, very harsh. There's very little stage direction or anything in his scripts. He's talking about being a director, and he's talking about being a bad director, honestly. It's funny, I just saw an interview with Guillermo del Toro, who's a magnificent director, who said, you can't control things as a director. Your job as a director is to create creative accidents, to make a place where other people's creativity is going to come in and be part of it. So the answer is, Mamet is talented and kind of nuts. He has these theories, which he insists upon with the mania of someone who needs control. He has a very famous belief that actors should not act, that they should simply present the words exactly as written, and that the production will do the acting for them. He calls it uninflected. It's nonsense, and it makes often for rather awkward directing work by David Mamet. Some of his stuff works. It's still very hard to take, whereas when other people direct his work, it usually is much better. David Mamet makes proclamations which are sometimes brilliant and often just ridiculously untrue. So what I would say is when you say he said it in the seminar, were you in do you mean like there was like a live class or something? Or just let me know about that, Stay Foolish. Anyway, looking forward to the new book. Yay, me too. When locked in, I only see cuts. I can relate. I might add another section because it needs to be there, but 90% of the time is spent trimming and shaping the words. Yes, I would agree. I mean, obviously, there are moments when I will add something, but what I'm discovering is, having spent a few years adding, now I'm mainly cutting. For many, many years, I was adding and adding and adding. So this is not the beginning of the process. This is the end of the process. How do you define have confidence? That's interesting because there's actually a chapter in the book called Confidence. I believe two things. One, confidence comes after you work. You don't get confidence before you work. But what I would say is, I define confidence as not being afraid. Confidence is not having fear. And what happens creatively is, you're kind of worried about a lot of stuff. You don't know how to do it. You feel at a certain point, you begin to become unafraid, which seems like confidence. You begin to be able to make a decision and say, yes, this is the way this is going to be done. This is not. And you're not worried about it because you've made that decision. So the way it works, the way you experience it, is when you open up the work, you feel like you know what you have to do, and you have a good sense that when you start working, you do it. You stop thinking about whether you should do it, and you just do it. You just start working on the thing you are trying to do, not whether or how to do it. You've made the decision and you're doing it. That is what I call creative confidence. Hello, Orphe. Hello, Pelicans. I hope I can finish most of mine before it is published. Yes, I would say this. I'm not an expert on books, but finish it before you publish it, I would say. What do you think of the hero's journey? Like with the Save the Cat and everything else, I believe that there are insights in these systems which can be useful. Hero's journey more than Save the Cat, but hero's journey is not, every story is not going to fit that formula. So the answer is, it is a formula. It is a pattern you can follow. It is not the only one. And to say every story has this pattern is incorrect. And it's based in a misreading of Joseph Campbell, who wrote a book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces, in which he said all stories are one story. They're all variations on this one basic story with the hero's journey. That story was a story he believed in at the time. It was a very psychoanalytical story. It was a very Western culture story. And very soon after, he published a series, not very soon after, but after that book, Hero with 1,000 Faces, he published 4 books called The Masks of God, which are much broader and cover all sorts of mythology which does not fit the hero's journey. And in those books, especially in the last one, at the introduction to the last one, Creative Mythology, he said, basically, I was wrong. There are many, many different forms of story and mythology. They are not all one version. This is just what happens when you apply psychoanalysis to Western culture. You can find one story. It's not all stories. It was just a terrible mistake, which unfortunately Christopher Vogler took from the initial book and expounded on it about movies. It's an interesting book. It's got a lot of valuable ideas, but it's not all. You can't follow it and say every story should be like this. There is no such thing. Blanket statement. There is no single formula of story that will apply to all stories. If there was, all works of art would be alike, and they're not. Okay. Even Brandon Sanderson, who is notorious for long books, says YA can't fit it all. You can't fit it all in, and that's okay. Yeah. Even the greatest 1,000-page novels, and which I love in many ways, although as I get older, I'm more reluctant to take them on because time is short. Even then, there's limits, and that is a thing. Your rival screenwriting YouTube channel says that if we don't watch Francois Truffaut movies, we will never be screenwriters. Well, that's dumb. All of that is, I hate to say this, but any kind of threatening warning rule is wrong, is frankly silly. I'm going to be nice and call it silly as opposed to dumb. It's just wrong to say that anyone, there's plenty of filmmakers who have not watched Truffaut. I think it's a shame. I think Truffaut is brilliant. I think Truffaut is wonderful, but he's not the answer to all things. People say a lot of that. When you're doing these teaching things, you often get into this game of thinking that you need to make these definitive, bold statements or stuff, and it's truly embarrassing, truthfully. You shouldn't do it. You should try and be a good teacher. And a good teacher is a little more open-minded and hopefully humble. Okay. By the way, I just wanted to add to that before I get into Imogen's next comment. There is the video I did for Film Courage, which is the one that's been seen the most. It's like 4 million views or something. It has one of those threatening titles. It has a title that says something, if you don't do if you don't have these steps, you can't tell a story or something. That I don't believe that. I didn't write that headline. I am glad that for whatever reason it triggered the algorithm and people watched it. But Film Courage people who are dolls and they know what they're doing and they knew how to promote my video, and God bless them. But I do not stand by that headline. I do not think that is true. Okay. My friend, who's an aspiring screenwriter, writes a lot of shorts and tells me I must go by the Dan Harmon story circle, and it drives me bonkers. He reviews my stuff within that formula. Yes. Okay, hold on. Let me see. I did a video called Getting Notes, and you should take a look at that because in that I talk about what happens when you get people's criticism and what you need to do with that. Because one thing that happens is you need to say, I have to judge their criticism by their value system. In other words, if they're coming to me and saying, I want to follow this Hollywood formula that is successful right now, that may not be what you're trying to do. So therefore, their criticism is going to be offbeat. It's not going to fit. It's going to be off balance for what you are trying to do. You need to find criticism that understands what you are trying to do and is giving you help to do the thing you want to do. If you don't want to do Dan Harmon's story circle and your critic is saying you have to follow this formula, well, no, you don't. And you should politely say to them, thank you for your, that's interesting. And maybe the thing is sometimes in their criticism using that formula, they'll say something that you'll think, oh, that point about that scene is true. I don't have to fit the formula. I don't have to fit the story circle, but I can take that bit of the note. Yes, drives me bonkers too. The most ridiculous thing is that some teachers conclude ANORA is a bad movie based on Save the Cat. And therefore Oscars, you know, at this point, I honestly believe, and this is one of the reasons I am trying to work down to doing less of these videos. I just wish everyone would shut up. I just wish people would stop spouting opinions all the time. There are just too many. It is really cool that we can all now have this venue, this online place where we can spout our opinions. But God damn, it's just clogging our brains. It is making our world unworkable because people are their creativity is going into their proclamations and their opinions and their battles in order to say something that will be a hot take and get attention instead of actually helping each other. So yeah, this is why I am trying to stop making these videos. I'm going to make videos, but not these teaching videos, because I really have said everything I have to say. And the idea, and so basically most of these videos are now me just repeating myself, which I don't mind doing. A good teacher has new people or new things come in and you get to say the same thing to them and it's like new to them. But this idea that we're all going to like solve art. Art is not something you solve. It's not ever finished. Art is not something that you get the answer to. You are constant. Everyone is constantly working on it. Art is a thing you do on a daily basis, and you're constantly trying to reinvent it and rediscover it and create. That is the point of being an artist, not to fulfill some fantasy of a formula and then you're done and you got it right. None of that makes any sense. Okay. Do you think Western storytelling is too tied to the 3-act structure? Eastern styles feel more subtle and less conflict-driven. This is a tricky question because I agree with your premise, which is that the 3-act structure of Western storytelling, which has developed over time but was not always the case. You know, the Aeneid doesn't have a 3-act structure. Paradise Lost doesn't have it. Hamlet doesn't have it. The 3-act structure developed in the 19th and 20th centuries, I believe. Maybe the 18th century, but I think the 19th really. That's not that long. That's the thing, is it just, yes, it is important to know the 3-act structure, because the good thing about the 3-act structure is that it mirrors the shape of beginning, middle, and end. And that is a useful thing to keep in mind, that your story has a beginning, middle, and end. But the shape within your beginning, middle, and end is unlimited possibilities. And the idea that you have to have certain things happen this way is reassuring. It helps the audience who are from that tradition to understand and enjoy. It's shorthand. And also once you've trained an audience over generations to expect a certain formula, they get thrown off if you break that formula. Luckily, in the past 30, 40 years, that formula has been breaking down in movies. There are more movies that don't follow it. And the more that there are, the more that the audience will open up. But still, you are fighting a tradition. On the other hand, the ability to learn from other types of storytelling, and that would include, by the way, the whole point about the Truffaut, the French New Wave, the Italian neorealists, all these different avant-garde filmmakers in the post-war America and Europe and Japan too, South America. There's forms that came in that broke the formula, and that helped with the breakdown of the Hollywood system, which I think was a good thing. The Hollywood system works, but it's not the only way, and they had a monopoly for a long time. That broke down in the 60s, 70s of the 20th century. And I think that's wonderful. But it is hard. It is hard to get people to understand on a mass audience basis when the mass audience has been built on this 3-act structure, because Remember, film history is very short. It's only 125 years old. Drama history is 5,000. Poetry history, narrative history is 6,000 years old. So therefore, there have been many, many versions. Film history started in 1905-ish. So we're talking 120 years. We're talking about a very limited number of generations, many of which were controlled by one business plan. Because from the 1920s through the end of the century, there was a very, very clear grip on what got made and what got released by a very distinct set of companies with a certain business plan, and that created a 3-act formula. Anyway, those are my thoughts. My answer is, do I think it is too tied to the 3-act structure? Yes. Do I think that we should abandon and never use the 3-act structure? No. I don't think it's bad. I think it has been what's the word? Antitrust. There's been a 3-act trust, and we need to break up the 3-act trust and widen the playing field. Yes, today is Wednesday. Hi, Larry. I am trying to write a feature film that can direct with a budget of US dollars, $10, and shoot in my own home so I can direct it. In that case, you just write a shooting script. If you're planning to finance it yourself, write the script exactly as you need it as a director. I have had the same experience. There have been certain scripts where I said, I am going to write exactly what I know how I can shoot with the money I have in my pocket. So therefore, yes, absolutely. That is a very different kind of writing. Write it so that you are expressing to your collaborators, to your actors, and to your crew what they need to imagine or understand. And that's it. That's all you need to do to write your stuff if you're going to make it yourself. Hello, Burgundy. I'm not sure French New Wave movies are the best way to learn screenwriting, since they were meant to be realistic and a fair bit of them rely on actors improvising scenes. Yes, this is exactly the point. While the breakdown of the monopoly of the 3-act Hollywood formula is valuable, you don't want to make the alternatives a formula either, especially when their point was to break the formula. You can't make a formula of breaking formulas. What you want to do is take their attitude, which was question the formula, and then find your own solution to it, in my opinion. The problem with some of these radical alternatives to the 3-act structure is that they are sort of a dead end, just like certain artistic forms may be intellectually interesting or radical in that they broke the rules, but then there is only so far you can go with that rule-breaking plan. And honestly, often the best thing is to take a part of that attitude and a part of the 3-act and a part of whatever you love in Korean films or Russian films or Bolivian films, whatever it is. Try and learn all the different voices, all the different methods, and keep them in what I like to call your toolbox, and say, oh, right now I think we need to loosen up the formula and maybe put something in here that's not going to be resolved, because that's cool. It will open up the audience's minds. But you don't have to have everything be unresolved. I don't know, Larry. Larry's saying you don't have to buy anything, just use your phone camera and mic. The problem with your phone camera and mic is that your phone camera is very likely relatively fixed wide, and you might want a different kind of lens. But yes, you can, and there are some adapters for phone lenses. Some phone lenses can get a little, the portrait mode, depends on your camera, and the phone mic is not good enough. You need a closer mic. You need a mic that can get more focused sound. Phone mics don't do that great with that. Okay. My screenwriting teacher in the MA program is a good friend with David Mamet, so it just pops up out of nowhere in the class. Well, that's interesting. Mamet is a brilliant talent. he is also a very difficult and problematic person. And this has always been true. It's not just now that he's turned so right-wing. He's always loved to be a contrarian and to make these wild statements about what kind of haircuts you should have. And you just have to sort of sort that out. Just like, you get somebody, some like great, painter or writer from the 1930s, and they're like gung-ho communism, but they're also incredibly brilliant talents. And you have to sort of say, well, I don't know that we need to follow the Comintern in order to be a good writer, but at the same time, damn, they're a good writer. So yeah, that's cool. Mamet is something else. I think the hero's journey is total nonsense. I cannot agree. I do not think it's total nonsense. I think it is visible in many stories, and the truth is there is a certain mythology. Just like there's a certain mythology of certain biblical stories, and there's a certain mythology of ancient Greek theater and poetry. And these are useful to know these stories because there are many existing stories and you should know them. So there you go. Okay. Who are the writers who inspired you? Too big a question for this late. You know what? I'm gonna make that a topic for another time. Writers who inspired me. Topic. Okay, I wrote it down. I will get to that, Scapular. Okay, no more questions. We're running out of time. Speaking of books, I noticed that my many screenwriting books with the tagline, "The last screenwriting book you will ever need." Yeah. Of course. What are they going to say? This is just one of many, many, many screenwriting books, and you need all of them. Yeah, that's, what are you going to do? What did Truffaut do before Truffaut movies were out? Yes, exactly. I guess they weren't screenwriters, including Truffaut. Well, actually, that's tricky because Truffaut was a film critic. He and many great film writers started out actually as film critics. Paul Schrader, Peter Bogdanovich in America. There have been a bunch of film writers and directors who started out as critics as a way to be in the film business before they could get filmmaking made. So weirdly, Truffaut was a great and interesting critic. Obviously, as with all critics and all artists, he had his peculiarities and his passions, and he was of his time. But the answer is, your point is well taken. If you have to watch Truffaut to be a screenwriter, what did Truffaut do? And what happened before Truffaut, since there was a good 50 solid years of brilliant films before Truffaut. Okay. When everyone works under one formula, there's possibly a good market for things outside that formula, especially if the current market is oversaturated. That is a tricky thing. I've always believed that, but I have found that the business doesn't usually see that. The business usually goes towards the formula, and it's only a sort of outlier bunch of business people who are often very successful who say, let's go counter to the formula. But the business, the market, they tend to just churn the formula until it is muddy horror. The funniest line I have ever seen was a screenwriter on his blog, right on his blog, "If we want to be a screenwriter in Hollywood, stop watching foreign films on Criterion Channel and focus on mainstream US movies." That's tricky because he's not entirely wrong. If you wanted to be a screenwriter in Hollywood is the key thing there. And I think that is true. Wherever you want to work, if you want to work in a certain part of the business or a certain part of the arts, yes, you should look at that thing. If you want to be a Hollywood screenwriter, you should definitely keep up on what Hollywood is doing. The interesting thing is, as I have said, in the past 30, 40 years, but especially in the past 10 years, Hollywood has sort of been broken up, more because of technology breaking up the companies than a sudden enlightenment as to storytelling. But what's happened is, but there is more unformulaic film making happening. Sinners just came out The movie Sinners is really cool in many ways because it is messing with it's a horror movie, but it does not follow the formula of a horror movie at all. Okay. Most internet gurus, not Glenn, are trying to have wishful thinking that there are shortcuts. There are no shortcuts. It's better to sit down and write. I agree with Tom Lewis. Yes, we're all too much of teaching is attempting to give you the answer. And in creative work, you can't give someone the answer. You can just, frankly, give them the question and give them some possibilities and say, go, do your thing. Go write something, as one very brilliant teacher said. I don't think any Kurosawa movie fits 3-act, and they even switches protagonists halfway through the movie. Yeah, I know. High and Low just blew my mind. High and Low is just all sorts. It's like 4 movies in one. Very cool. There is the Werner Herzog rule I agree on. Read, read, read. Yes, that is absolutely true. If you are going to be in an art form, like writing, you must read. You must read. If you are going to be in an art form in music, you must A, listen to a lot, and then B, practice a lot. And likewise, film, you should watch a lot of movies as well as reading, because when you're a screenwriter, you are both in the film business, but also in the writing business. Okay. I'm not sure Eastern movies are less conflict-driven at all. It depends on how you define conflicts. That is also true. Burgundy is sharp as usual in that there is a problem with defining drama as conflict. But it is also true that you got a lot of Hong Kong action crime films which are heavily conflict-oriented. I don't think that you can say for sure that all yes, certain traditions emphasize it. There was a while there where people were saying film is conflict or writing is conflict, and that is not true. But it had a vogue for a while, and that's bad thinking. It's just not true. It is not conflict. Conflict is one thing that can happen in a narrative, but many, many other things can happen. Hello, Mark Burton. I am glad you wanted to say thank you. I hope you are doing well. I hope you've been working through your issues. Thank you, A-Link. Michael says, I spent months working on a 3rd draft, and my brother says, why don't you AI it? The comment pissed me off for good reason. Is your brother an artist or a writer? Because if so, you can scold him. Otherwise, he's just a civilian. You know, what are you going to do? Fung loves Sinners. Yay! I have not actually seen it. I have heard a detailed report from someone who told me basically everything that happens in the movie. I have stuff going on in my life and I can't see it till the end of next week, but I am going to the theater to see that. Okay. You are welcome, Lake Filter. Please keep doing these interactive live streams. Yes. Here's my deal. I am planning to stop teaching live streams mostly, but I'm going to do weekly or more live streams about my creative process as I work on creative projects, which will include discussions of other possibilities and other people's work. But the main thing is I want to stop. Like I said, I've just said it all. Everything I've said is in my videos already. And I want to share creative work instead of sharing teaching. But I do not plan to go away. I do not plan to stop live streaming. I am planning to make this as interactive as possible and have a lot of fun, really getting nitty-gritty behind the scenes in what I do creatively from here on, starting in the fall, once this book is done. So thank you so much. I will keep doing them, honest, as long as I can. Tom Lewis prefers challenge rather than conflict. I would say that, to me, action. And only because I define dramatic action as simply someone doing something. Like if someone is reaching out to heal a rift, that's an action. It's not conflict. It's not even the challenge. May be the possibility of the healing failing, but for me, the reason I always talk about drama or dramatic action is because there are so many possibilities that I don't like to limit the type of action. I just feel it should be an action in the sense that someone should be doing something almost all the time. That's my thought. And with that thought, I will end by saying, go write something.